We're continuing the story of Pilgrim's Progress, and remember, he's just lost the scroll because he was sleeping. The scroll was his encouragement to read as he traveled to the celestial city. Then he remembered falling asleep at the shady resting place halfway up the hill, difficult, and figured out what had happened. He fell to his knees and asked God for forgiveness for his foolish neglect. Then, without delay, he went back down the hill to look for his scroll. His heart was full of sorrow every step of the way. Sometimes he sighed, sometimes he wept, and he often chided himself for being so foolish as to fall asleep in that place. After all, it had been established for the purpose of modest refreshment from his weariness. He travelled back down the hill further and further, carefully looking on this side and on that. His eyes eagerly searched for any sight of the scroll which had given him comfort so many times in his journey. He continued his downhill journey until he reached the shady resting place where he sat and slept. At the sight of this place his sorrow multiplied with a fresh reminder of this evil of sleeping. As the book says, "So then let us not sleep as others do, but let us be alert and sober. For those who sleep do their sleeping at night, and those who get drunk at night. But since we are of the day, let us be sober, having put on the breastplate of faith and love, and as a helmet the hope of salvation." In this way he went on regretting his sinful sleep, saying, "O wretched man that I am, that I should sleep in the daytime, that I should sleep in the midst of difficulty." A small sob escaped his lips with his breath, that I should so indulge myself as to allow rest for the ease of my flesh, as to sleep in the place which the Lord of the hill built only for the relief of the spirits of pilgrims. I have taken these needless steps even in the same manner as Israel was required to do. It was for their sin that they were sent back again to wander in the wilderness by way of the Red Sea. In the same way, I am forced to walk this way again with sorrow, a way which should have only been walked with delight had it not been for this sinful sleep. How much further along I might have been on my way by this time. Instead, I am forced to walk these steps 3 times instead of once, and now the night is about to overtake me, since the day is almost spent. Oh, if only I had not slept. By this time he had finally arrived at the shady resting place again, where for a while he sat down and wept. He remained downcast until at last his eyes fell upon the scroll. His fingers trembled with excitement as he snatched it up and thrust it into his pocket next to his heart. I can't begin to say how joyful Christian was when he recovered his scroll, for this scroll was the assurance of his life and acceptance at the desired sanctuary of the celestial city. So, with the scroll safely tucked away in his pocket, he thanked God for directing his eyes to the place where it lay, and with joy and tears he focused on moving forward in his journey. Oh, how nimbly he climbed the rest of the hill, yet before he reached the top, the sun had set upon Christian. It made him all the more aware of the foolishness of his sleeping, and how it had delayed him. He again began to grieve. "How sinful you are, O sleep! Because of you my journey, which should have been in the light, has been overtaken by the night. I must walk without the sun. Darkness covers the path of my feet, and now I must listen to noises of miserable creatures, all because of my sinful sleep." Now the story Mistrust and Timorous had told him came to mind, along with how they were frightened by the sight of the lions. Then Christian said to himself, "These beasts prowl in the night for their prey. If they should meet up with me in the darkness, how can I possibly avoid them? How can I escape being torn in pieces by them?" He nervously went on his way, growing more jittery as he went. While he complained about his unhappy circumstances, he lifted up his eyes and spotted a regal palace directly ahead of him. The name of it was the Palace Beautiful, and it stood to one side of the highway. In my dream, Christian hurried along the way toward the palace, in hopes that he might get lodging there. However, before he had gone far, he entered into a very narrow passage, which was about 220 yards long, off the porter's lodge. He carefully proceeded through the restricted path, keeping his eyes alert as he went, and there he spotted 2 lions standing in the way. He thought, Now I see the dangers that cause mistrust and timorous to turn back and flee. The lions were chained, but he couldn't see the chains that constrained the ferocious beasts. Fear filled him, and he thought about going back just as they did, because at that moment he thought there was nothing ahead of him but death. But the porter at the palace lodge, whose name was Watchful, noticed Christian's hesitation, and that he looked as if he might go back. The porter cried out to him, "Is your strength and courage so small? Don't be afraid of the lions, for they are chained. They're placed there to test your faith at this point in your journey. They also show clearly those who have no faith. So stay in the middle of the path, and you will not be harmed." Then I saw Christian go forward, though he still trembled with fear of the lions. He took care to follow the porter's directions and stayed to the middle of the path. The lions roared and snarled, but they did him no harm. He clapped his hands with joy and went on till he stood before the palace gate where the porter awaited. Then said Christian to Watchful, "Sir, what is the purpose of this house, and may I stay here for the night?" The porter answered, "This house was built by the Lord of the Hill, and he built it for the relief and security of pilgrims." The porter looked directly at Christian and asked, "Where are you from, and where are you going?" "I have come from the city of destruction," Christian said, "and am going to Mount Zion. But now that the sun is set, I would like, if I may, to stay here tonight." "What is your name?" "Oh, now my name is Christian, but originally my name was Graceless. I was born of the race of Japheth, whom God will persuade to dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." The porter's eyes narrowed. "But how is it that you have arrived so late? The sun has already set." Christian looked away for a moment, too ashamed to meet the porter's eyes. "I would have been here sooner, but worthless man that I am, I slept in the shade resting place that stands on the hill Difficulty. Even in spite of that, I would have been here much sooner, except that while I slept, I lost my scroll of certification. When I reached the top of the hill, I felt for it in my pocket, and when it wasn't there, my heart was filled with sorrow, and I was forced to go back to the place where I had overslept. I finally found it there and pressed forward on my journey once again. Now, at this hour, I have come this far." The porter said, "Well, I will call out one of the virgins of this place. If she likes what you have to say, she will invite you to join the rest of the family according to the rules of the house." So Watchful, the porter, rang a bell. At the sound of the bell, a serious but beautiful young woman named Discretion came out of the door and asked, "Why have you called me?" And the porter answered, "This man is on a journey from the city of destruction to Mount Zion, but he's weary, and seeing that the sun has set, he asked if he might stay here for tonight. So I told him I would call for you, and that after talking with him you would decide what seems best according to the rules of the house." Then the young woman asked Christian, "Where are you from, and where are you going?" And he told her. And she also asked him how he got into the way, and he told her. Then she asked him what he had seen and met in the way, and he told her all that as well. Lastly, she asked his name. He said, "My name is Christian, and I have a greater desire to stay here tonight, now that I understand this place was built by the Lord of the Hill for the relief and security of pilgrims." So she smiled, and tears brimmed in her eyes. After a slight pause, she said, "I will call for 2 or 3 more of the family." So she ran to the door and called to Prudence, Piety, and Charity, who came out to meet him. Following a little more conversation with him, they invited him inside to meet the rest of the family. Many of them met him at the threshold of the house and warmly welcomed him inside, saying, "Come in, you are blessed of the Lord. This house was built by the Lord of the Hill, specifically for the purpose of entertaining pilgrims such as you." Christian bowed his head in respect and followed them into the house. Once inside, he sat down, and they gave him something to drink. They agreed that until supper was ready, to make the best use of time, some of them should have a conversation with Christian regarding specific matters. So Piety, Prudence, and Charity were chosen for this discussion, and they began to talk with him. "Come, Christian," Piety said, Since we have shown love to you and received you into our house tonight, let's talk about all things that have happened to you in your pilgrimage. Perhaps talking about these things will help us better ourselves. I'm thankful for your goodwill, and I'm glad your attitude is so friendly. Piety asked, what made you decide to take to a pilgrim's life in the first place? I was driven from my native country by a dreadful message that unavoidable destruction would consume me if I continued to live in the city of destruction. But how did it happen that you came from your country in this direction? She asked. Christian told her that it was what God wanted. For when I was fearful of destruction and hanging over me, I didn't know which way to go. But by chance a man by the name of Evangelist came to me. As I was trembling and weeping, he directed me to the wicket gate. If he hadn't, I would never have found it, and so he pointed out the way that has led me directly to this house. Piety's brow furrowed in thought. But didn't you come by the way of the house of the interpreter? Oh, yes, Christian nodded, eager to share the experience. The things I saw there are most memorable. They'll stick with me as long as I live. 3 of the things I saw especially made an impact. The first is how Christ, in opposition to Satan, maintains his work of grace in the heart. The second is how the man in the iron cage had sinned himself quite out of hope of God's mercy. And the third is the dream of the man who thought in his sleep that the day of judgment had come. Did you hear him tell his dream? Yes, Christian said. I thought it was a dreadful revelation. It made my heart ache as he told it, and yet I'm glad I heard it. Was this all you saw at the house of the interpreter? Christian shook his head. No, he took me to a place where he showed me a stately palace, and how the people in the palace were dressed in gold. Then a courageous man cut his way through the armed men who stood at the door to keep him out, and once he did, he was commanded to come inside and win eternal glory. My heart and mind were totally overwhelmed at the sight of these things. I would have stayed at that good man's house for a year, except I knew I had further to go. What else did you see along the way? See? Well, I had only gone a little further when I saw one, as if in my mind, hanging upon a tree bleeding. The very sight of him made my burden fall off my back, for I had groaned under a heavy burden. But it dropped off my back just like that. He snapped his fingers. I had never seen such a thing, and it surprised me. While I stood looking up, for I couldn't stop looking, 3 shining ones came to me. One of them declared that my sins were forgiven. Another stripped me of my rags and gave me this embroidered coat. And the third set the mark you see upon my forehead and gave me this sealed scroll. He pulled a scroll from his pocket and showed it to her. But you saw even more than this, didn't you? Christian thought about it for a second and said, the things I've told you were the best, but I did see some other interesting things. For instance, I saw 3 men, Simple, Sloth, and Presumption, lying asleep beside the way by which I came. They wore shackles upon their heels. But do you think I could awaken them? It was almost impossible. I also saw Formalist and Hypocrisy come stumbling over the wall instead of entering by the wicket gate, and they pretended to be headed to Zion. But they were quickly lost, and even though I warned them, they would not believe. However, the hardest thing for me was getting up this hill, and it was equally difficult to muster the faith to get by the mouths of the lions. I'm telling you, if it hadn't been for the good man Watchful, the porter who stands at the gate, I'm not sure that I wouldn't have gone back down the hill. But I thank God I'm here, and thank you for receiving me. Prudence jumped into the conversation and said, I have a few questions I'd like you to answer. First, do you sometimes think of the country from which you came? Yes, and he let out a sigh, but not with fondness. I think of where I came from with much shame and loathing, and the truth be told, if I had yearned for that country, I might have taken opportunity to return there by now. Instead, my heart desires a better country, that is a heavenly one. The book says, and indeed if they had been thinking of that country from which they went out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Prudence took in a deep breath and let it out slowly. Don't you carry some memories of the things you did there and the people you talked to? Yes, I do, but greatly against my will, especially deep inside my carnal thoughts and reasoning. You see, all my countrymen, as well as myself, delighted in debating about such things. But now all those things only grieve me. If I could control my thoughts, I would choose never to think of those carnal things ever again. But even if I was able to do that, which is best, that which is worst would still live within me. For the book says, for what I'm doing, I do not understand. For I'm not practicing what I would like to do, but I'm doing the very thing I hate. I find then the principle that evil is present in me, the one who wants to do good. Prudence tilted her head slightly to the side. Did you sometimes find that those things related to personal carnality were overcome, yet at other times were cause for great puzzlement and confusion? Oh, sure, but those times of victory over carnally happened infrequently. However, when they did happen, it was truly golden. When you experience such precious times in overcoming carnal annoyance, can you remember how you obtained these victories? Oh, yes, there are several means. For instance, when I think and meditate on what I saw at the cross, that will do it. And when I look at my embroidered coat, that will do it. Plus, when I read and study the scroll I carry in my pocket next to my heart, that will do it. When my thoughts are warmly stimulated about where I am going, and that will do it too. Prudence pressed him further. And what is it that makes you so desirous to go to Mount Zion? Christian's eyes grew wide and dreamy. Why, I hope to see him, alive, who hung dead on the cross, and there I hope to be rid of all those things that remain as an annoyance to me. There at the celestial city they say there's no death. The book says he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will no longer be any death. There will be no longer any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away, and there I'm going to dwell with such companions I like best, for to tell you the truth, I love him because he released me from my burden, and I'm weary of my inward sickness. In view of this, I prefer to be where I shall die no more, and in the company of others who shall continually cry, Holy, holy, holy. Charity glanced around and looked back at Christian. Why didn't you bring them along with you? He hung his head and wept. Oh, how willingly would I have brought them. I have wife and children and neighbors, but all of them were utterly against my going on pilgrimage. Charity pursed her lips. But you should have talked to them, and should have attempted to show them the danger of staying behind. Christian gestured with his palms up as he shrugged. I did, and he let his arms drop. I also told them what God had shown to me about the destruction of our city, but they looked at me like one telling a joke, and they didn't believe me. And did you pray to God that he would bless them with understanding of your warning to them? Oh, yes, he nodded fervently. I prayed with much love. You must know that my wife and poor children were very dear to me. But did you tell them of your sorrow and fear of destruction? I expect that the prospect of destruction was clear enough to you. Christian ran his fingers through his hair. I did, again and again and again. They could also see my fears were very real by my expression, by my tears, and also in the way I trembled under the anxiety of the judgment that hung over our heads. But even all this wasn't enough to get them to come with me. But why on earth wouldn't they come? Why did they have to say for themselves why they would not come? Christian wiped his hand across his face and looked at the ground. Well, for one thing, my wife was afraid of losing what she had in this world. And my children, he looked up at Charity, well, they were absorbed with the foolish pleasures of youth. So because of these types of things and other distractions, they left me to wander in this distressed frame of mind alone. The young woman's face grew more serious. So with all your efforts to persuade your loved ones to depart from the city of destruction and come with you, did your futile, empty manner of life discourage them from acting on your advice? As the story goes now, we find Christian realizing that his actions and his lifestyle did not encourage people from his family or his neighbors to follow with him to the city of Zion, to the celestial city. And I just wonder if you and I we know where we're going. We know that we're going to heaven. We have saved. We have our sins forgiven. The burdens are taken away from us. But are we living the life that would show these things to those around us? I would ask you to be a witness for what God has done for you. Be excited about the walk that you're taking. Yes, there's going to be difficulties, as we talked before, but we also have a final destiny. And that is a final destiny, which is Jesus Christ, meeting him in the heavenly place and seeing Father God. And to get there, we have the Holy Spirit to encourage us and comfort us. I ask you, are you, did you, will you pray for your neighbors, your family members, so that they too might find their way to the narrow road? God bless you as you pray for them and as you walk closer to the celestial city.